What happens when a soldier disobeys an order that could save hundreds of lives and ends up being right? The morning began like any other on the base at Camp Pendleton. The sun rose in slow golden strokes over the barracks, slicing through the ocean fog that rolled inland from the Pacific. Boots clattered against gravel, orders barked, metal clicked, rifles were checked. But beneath the steady rhythm of routine, something else moved. Something quiet, almost invisible. A tension in the air. The kind that makes even the most disciplined Marine glance over their shoulder without knowing why. Private First Class Elena Ruiz felt it too. It was her 4th week in Bravo Company, fresh out of basic, still trying to fit the uniform in both body and spirit. She was 21, sharp-eyed, and quicker to listen than to speak. Her superiors called her by the book. Her fellow rookies called her Ice, because she never cracked, never joked, never let her guard down. That morning, Captain Mallory stood at the center of the training field shouting assignments, live simulation drills, standard protocol. Ruiz's squad was tasked with securing the perimeter during a mock base breach, a controlled exercise meant to test response times. Everything was simple, predictable, until it wasn't. The first sign came when Ruiz noticed the birds. A cluster of starlings burst from the tree line beyond the firing range, twisting into the air like smoke. She froze mid-step. Something about the motion. It wasn't random. It was panic. Then came a faint sound, carried by the wind. Not thunder, not gun, something metallic. A low hum just beneath the threshold of hearing. Ruiz turned her head slightly, straining to catch it again, but the sound vanished. The others kept moving, laughing, adjusting their rifles, checking gear. The field was alive with the dull thud of boots and the sharp clap of shouted commands. But for Ruiz, everything felt muted, distant, as if the world had slipped a layer away from her. She glanced back toward the tree line. The fog had thickened, curling like smoke through the pines. Her pulse quickened. There was movement out there. Subtle, rhythmic. Not the erratic flutter of wildlife. It was deliberate. She raised her hand instinctively, signaling her squad to halt. But Corporal Hensley, her immediate superior, didn't even look back. "Keep moving, rookie. This isn't your call." "Corporal, something's wrong," she said. Her voice was steady but urgent. He laughed, a short, harsh sound. "You see ghosts, Ruiz? It's a drill. Stay in line." Her gut twisted. She wanted to obey. She wanted to be the perfect soldier, the kind her instructors wrote about in evaluations. But every instinct screamed that something was off. And then she heard it again. The hum. Louder now. Closer. Beneath it, a faint metallic click. Then another. Like the mechanical breath of a machine being readied. Ruiz stopped walking. "Ruiz!" Hensley barked, turning. "You're out of formation." But before she could answer, the sound broke into a sharp whine, and then a concussive crack split the air. Dirt erupted beside her boots, spraying her legs with soil and stone. A second later, the alarm sirens ripped through the base. Every head snapped toward the sound. A real alarm, not a drill. The tone was unmistakable. 3 long wails, 1 short burst. Breach warning. Hensley's face went pale. "Get down," he shouted. Gunfire answered from the tree line. Real bullets. Real screams. The fog shattered with chaos. Ruiz hit the ground, heart hammering. Her training surged forward, automatic, mechanical. Return fire, locate threat, move to cover. But as she raised her rifle, she saw something no one else had yet. Small black shapes moving low and fast through the fog. Drones. They weren't standard issue. Their movements were too sharp, too aggressive. Foreign tech, maybe. Something she'd seen only in restricted footage during intelligence briefings. They sliced through the air in synchronized motion, scanning, mapping, targeting. Within seconds, the mock exercise had turned into a live combat zone. Ruiz crawled toward a sandbag wall, bullets whistling overhead. She could hear Hensley shouting orders, half commands, half panic. "Fall back. Secure the armory." But she knew something he didn't. The drones weren't random. They were hurting. Driving the squads toward the eastern gate, the same path they'd been instructed to take for the drill. Whoever was controlling them knew their layout, their procedures, their habits. Someone had studied them. She sprinted to the nearest comm station, a metal post with a field radio attached. Static. Dead channel. She adjusted the frequency, but every line was jammed. And then a familiar voice crackled faintly through the noise. Captain Mallory. All units, this is not a simulation. Repeat, this is not. The signal broke. Ruiz's hands tightened on the radio. Not a simulation. The words hung like a blade in her mind. A figure stumbled into view beside her. Private Duncan, his face streaked with mud and terror. What's happening? They said it was training. Stay low, Ruiz snapped. We're under attack. From who? She didn't answer. She didn't know. But even as she spoke, the sound of distant explosions rolled across the field. Something big had gone up near the hangars. Smoke spiraled into the sky. Ruiz grabbed Duncan's shoulder. We need to get to the control bunker. Now. They moved, crouched, weaving between concrete barriers and twisted fences. Around them, the base had become unrecognizable. A nightmare of flashing lights, shouting and gunfire swallowed by fog. Sirens wailed, radios sputtered, and the once disciplined lines of soldiers scattered like fragments of a broken mirror. Inside the chaos, Ruiz felt something strange, an eerie calm. Training, instinct, and something deeper guided her steps. She remembered her father's voice from years before, the way he'd spoken about the quiet before the truth. He'd served too, decades ago. Died in a place the government later denied existed. She joined the Corps partly to understand him, partly to find out what the truth cost. Now, in this moment, she felt closer to him than ever. The bunker loomed ahead, low, reinforced, half-hidden by camouflage netting. The heavy door was ajar. Duncan reached it first, peering inside. There's nobody here. Ruiz stepped in after him. The interior lights flickered weakly, powered by backup generators. Monitors lined the walls, showing static, half-broken feeds of the base perimeter. But one screen caught her eye. Camera 9, North Ridge. A thermal signature moved in the shadows. Human. Alone. She zoomed in. The figure was carrying something, long, metallic, shouldered like a rifle but heavier. A launcher. Enemy combatant? Duncan asked. Ruiz shook her head. No uniform, but look, he's signaling. To someone. On another feed, 3 more heat signatures answered from the tree line. Perfect coordination. It wasn't random. It was infiltration. Base security's been compromised, Ruiz said, almost to herself. They knew the drills, the timing, everything. How could they know that? Duncan asked. She turned toward him. Only if someone inside told them. For a moment, silence hung between them. The truth was unthinkable. Betrayal. Before they could act, the radio on the console hissed again. A different voice, raspy, strained. This is Command Post Delta. Mallory's down. Repeat. Captain Mallory is down. We need immediate... Static swallowed the rest. Ruiz's throat tightened. Mallory, gone. The man who'd vouched for her, who'd said she had instinct worth trusting. She forced herself to move. We have to seal the bunker, lock down the network. If they control comms, they control the entire defense grid. But as she approached the control panel, the monitors flickered, and one by one they went dark. A chill ran through her. Someone was already inside the system. Then came the sound, a slow creak of metal from behind the sealed door. Duncan spun, rifle raised. A shadow shifted. Identify yourself, Ruiz called out. No response, just breathing. Low, deliberate. She motioned to Duncan to hold position and stepped closer. The light hit the intruder's face, and her heart stopped. Sergeant Hale, Bravo Company's comm specialist. His uniform was stained, his left arm bandaged. Sergeant, she said, relief flooding her. What happened out there? He looked at her. Too long, too calm. Same thing that's happening here, Ruiz. The system's gone. What do you mean? He stepped forward, dragging a heavy case behind him. It clicked softly with each movement. They've taken control of the network, the drones, the perimeter. Everything's running on automated override. The base is blind. Ruiz glanced at the case. What's in there? Hale smiled faintly. Insurance. Duncan shifted uneasily. Sir, we need to... Hale's hand moved to his belt, fast. The sound of a pistol cocking froze them both. Step back, Hale said. His voice had changed, colder now, stripped of fatigue. You shouldn't be here. Ruiz's mind raced. The case, the system breach, the perfectly timed attack. It all lined up too neatly. You're the leak, she whispered. He didn't deny it. This base stopped fighting for the right reasons a long time ago, Ruiz. You'll understand soon. Understand what? That sometimes you have to burn something down to rebuild it. Before she could respond, the sirens wailed again, this time in a new tone, deep, pulsing, urgent. Not a breach alarm, evacuation. Ruiz's eyes darted to the monitors, now all black except one. Camera 9. The lone figure on the ridge had raised the launcher. A streak of light erupted from the trees. Down! Ruiz shouted. The missile struck somewhere above them. The bunker shuddered, dust cascading from the ceiling. Lights blew out. The room plunged into darkness. Hale lunged. Ruiz reacted faster, knocking the pistol aside. It clattered to the floor as the case slid open, revealing what lay inside. Not explosives. A data drive. Duncan scrambled for the weapon as Ruiz locked eyes with Hale. What's on it? The truth, he hissed. Another explosion rocked the base, closer this time. The sirens wailed louder, and somewhere outside, the ground itself seemed to roar. Hale jerked free, darting toward the emergency hatch. Ruiz lunged after him, but the blast from outside threw her backward. Her head struck the floor, vision blurring. Through the ringing in her ears, she saw Hale disappear into the smoke, clutching the drive. Then, silence. For a long moment, Ruiz lay still. Only the low hum of the failing generators filled the air. The fog seeped through the cracks in the bunker door, curling around her like ghostly fingers. Duncan crawled over, coughing. He's gone. What do we do now? She didn't answer immediately. Her mind replayed Hale's words. Burn it down to rebuild it. Slowly, she rose to her feet. We find him, she said quietly. And we find out what he meant by the truth. She looked once more at the dead monitors. In the black screens, her own reflection stared back, steady, unflinching, but changed. Outside, the alarms continued their haunting chorus across the burning base, and somewhere beyond the smoke, a figure moved through the fog, carrying the secret that would either destroy them all or prove who Elena Ruiz truly was. Smoke drifted through the corridors like a living thing, curling around broken light fixtures and whispering against the walls. The air was thick with the metallic tang of burned wiring and the faint electric scent of ozone. Private Elena Ruiz moved through it in silence, rifle raised, every step deliberate. The base that had once pulsed with precision and order now felt like a ghost town, hollow, echoing, and alive with secrets. Outside, distant gunfire rattled intermittently, followed by the low thunder of collapsing structures. Somewhere in the chaos, Hale was out there, carrying a stolen drive and a truth he claimed could justify everything he'd done. Ruiz couldn't shake his words. You'll understand soon. Duncan followed close behind, limping from a cut across his thigh, his face pale beneath streaks of soot. Ruiz, he muttered, breath ragged. Maybe we should wait for backup. Command's got to be sending someone. She didn't look back. There is no command anymore. He hesitated, hearing something in her tone that made his stomach turn. It wasn't despair. It was conviction. Cold, quiet conviction. They reached the edge of the motor pool where the concrete gave way to scorched earth. Vehicles lay overturned, some still burning. The fog had thickened again, blending with the smoke until the world was painted in shifting shades of gray. It felt less like morning and more like the edge of a dream that refused to end. Ruiz crouched, scanning the perimeter. He's heading north toward the old radar station. Duncan frowned. That's abandoned. Exactly, she said, which makes it the perfect place to hide something. They began moving again, weaving through the wreckage. The deeper they went, the quieter it became. No gunfire, no voices, only the hum of distant flames and the faint buzz of static from a dying comms tower. As they walked, Ruiz felt the pull of exhaustion creeping in. Her muscles ached, her mind replaying every choice she'd made in the last hour. Disobeying orders, breaking formation, taking charge without clearance. And yet, if she hadn't, they'd all be dead. The realization came like a slow-burning fuse. She'd trusted her instincts over the chain of command, and the chain had failed. When they reached the old access road, Duncan paused, wiping his brow. Ruiz, what if Hale wasn't lying? She turned to him sharply. You think betraying your own base is justified? I'm saying, he swallowed, searching for words. What if he wasn't the only one? What if someone higher up knew this was coming? The idea hit her harder than she expected. She'd pushed that thought away, buried it under orders and logic. But it was there, waiting. The precision of the attack, the timing, the drones that moved as if they knew every inch of the compound. It wasn't chaos. It was choreography. Keep moving, she said finally. But her voice had lost its certainty. They followed the cracked road toward the ridge, where the radar station loomed like a relic from another war. Its metal dome was half collapsed, the antennas bent and rusted. As they approached, Ruiz noticed the faint glow of lights flickering inside, too steady to be random. Someone was there. She motioned for Duncan to stay low. They moved along the side of the hill, climbing carefully until they could see through a broken window. Inside, Hale stood in front of a terminal, one of the old encrypted military consoles still hooked into the base's secondary systems. The data drive was plugged in. Streams of code spilled across the screen like veins of light. But he wasn't alone. A second figure stood behind him, a woman in an officer's uniform. Ruiz's chest tightened. She recognized her instantly. Major Laura Keene, Intelligence Division. Keene had been on base for weeks, overseeing what she called routine data audits. Ruiz remembered the way she spoke. Measured, polite, but with eyes that missed nothing. She was the kind of officer who never raised her voice because she never needed to. Now she was standing next to Hale, watching the data transfer with unnerving calm. Ruiz and Duncan ducked lower behind the ridge. What the hell is she doing here? Duncan whispered. Ruiz didn't answer. Her mind was racing. Hale hadn't been working alone, and whatever Keene wanted, it wasn't sabotage, it was control. Through the window, Hale's voice carried faintly. It's all here, every operation, every blackout report. They buried the truth under 3 layers of encryption, but it's here. Keene stepped closer, her expression unreadable. Good. Once this upload completes, we'll release it. To who? Hale asked. Keene's lips curved slightly. Everyone. Ruiz felt her stomach twist. If that data went public, it wouldn't just expose one mission. It could unravel every covert operation the Corps had ever conducted. Thousands of classified files, agents, allies, names. It wouldn't cleanse the system, it would burn it to ash. She whispered, They're not trying to rebuild anything. They're trying to destroy it all. Before Duncan could respond, a deep vibration rippled through the ground beneath them. From the far side of the ridge came the low whine of engines. A convoy. Ruiz peered over the edge and froze. Black, unmarked vehicles, headlights off, moving with military precision. These weren't rescue teams. These were retrieval units, silent, armed, and lethal. Keene must have heard them too. Inside, she turned sharply to Hale. They found us. We don't have time. Hale hesitated. The upload's only at 80%. Then we take what we have, Keene snapped, yanking the drive from the port. The screen flashed red, error messages spilling across it. Ruiz saw her chance. Now, she whispered. She and Duncan moved fast, sliding down the slope toward the side entrance. She felt the sting of gravel tearing through her gloves, the pounding of her heart in her ears. The door was partially open, hanging off its hinges. They slipped inside. The interior of the station smelled of rust and old rain. Light flickered across concrete walls, illuminating coiled cables and shattered screens. Hale was at the far end, hurriedly packing equipment into his case. "Freeze!" Ruiz shouted. Hale spun, weapon raised, but the moment he saw her eyes, something flickered in his expression. Recognition, almost regret. "You don't understand," he said. "If you knew what was on this—" "I don't care," Ruiz cut him off. "Put it down." Keen stepped from the shadows, her own pistol steady, aimed directly at Ruiz's chest. "Lower your weapon, Private," she said. "You're out of your depth." Duncan aimed his rifle. "You first, ma'am." For a heartbeat, no one moved. The sound of approaching engines grew louder outside. The retrieval teams were close. Keen's gaze stayed locked on Ruiz. "You think you're stopping corruption, but you're defending it. Everything you were taught to protect. The honor, the mission, the loyalty. It's all built on lies." Ruiz's voice trembled, but not from fear. "Then tell me the truth." Keen's tone softened, almost pitying. "Your father was one of us." The words hit like a physical blow. Ruiz froze. "That's not possible." He was recruited into Project Seraph, the same operation they erased from the records. He saw what they were doing to civilians, to entire regions under classified testing. When he tried to expose it, they silenced him. "You think he died in combat, but he didn't. He was executed for telling the truth." The room tilted around her. She remembered the folded flag, the official letter, the quiet condolences, lies, all of it. Keen lowered her weapon slightly. "You can walk away from this, Ruiz. Help us finish what your father started." For a long moment, Ruiz couldn't breathe. The world had narrowed to a heartbeat, the glint of light on steel, the memory of her father's voice. "Always trust what doesn't feel right." Duncan looked at her, wide-eyed. "Ruiz." But something in her expression had changed. The conflict that had once pulled her between obedience and instinct was gone. What replaced it was colder, sharper. "I'm not my father," she said quietly. "And I'm not you." She fired. The bullet shattered the case in Hale's hands, scattering fragments of plastic and sparks. The data drive flew across the floor. Hale dove for it. Duncan tackled him halfway. Keen fired back, bullets sparking against concrete. Ruiz ducked behind a pillar, heart pounding. The roar of engines outside grew deafening. The retrieval units had arrived. Doors slammed. Boots hit the ground. "Time's up," Keen hissed. She grabbed Hale by the collar, dragging him toward the emergency hatch. "We'll finish this somewhere else." Ruiz lunged forward, but the explosion hit before she could move. The wall nearest the hatch erupted inward, sending shockwaves through the room. Dust, light, and shrapnel filled the air. Ruiz hit the floor hard, ears ringing. Through the haze, she saw silhouettes. Armored soldiers storming in, weapons raised. Hale and Keen were gone, vanished into the smoke. Strong hands pulled Ruiz upright. Duncan's voice was faint, distant. "We have to go." She stumbled outside as the station behind them burned. The night sky was lit by the fire's glow, painting the fog blood orange. Somewhere in the distance, helicopters thundered toward the coast. Ruiz stopped, staring after them. She knew where they were headed, out to sea, toward the offshore data servers where the Corps stored everything too dangerous to keep on land. That was where Hale would finish what he'd started. She turned to Duncan. "We're not done." He looked at her, eyes wide with disbelief. "Ruiz, this is insane. They'll hunt us both." She met his gaze. "Then they'll have to find us first." Somewhere deep inside, beneath the fear and exhaustion, something steady took root. It wasn't loyalty anymore. It wasn't revenge. It was clarity. The kind that comes when everything you believed collapses, and you finally see the foundations beneath it. The fire behind her crackled and roared, devouring what was left of the base. As the first light of dawn bled through the smoke, Ruiz whispered to herself the question she didn't yet have the courage to answer. Who was my father really trying to save? and for the first time since the sirens began, she wasn't sure if she wanted to know the answer. The fire had died down to embers by the time the sun finally broke through the haze. The light didn't bring warmth, only a pale, hollow clarity that made every twisted remnant of the base seem more brutal in its stillness. Smoke hung low over the ruins, catching in the morning light like ghosts that refused to leave. Ruiz and Duncan moved through the wreckage in silence, their boots crunching over glass and scorched gravel. Every few steps they'd pass what used to be something familiar, a scorched helmet, a charred flag, a half-melted sign that once marked the barracks. The world they'd known, the structure and order and command had disintegrated in less than a day. Duncan broke the silence first. "We're fugitives now." His voice was rough, quiet. "You know that, right?" Ruiz didn't answer. Her gaze was fixed on the horizon, where faint black dots moved against the silver line of the sea. Helicopters, distant but deliberate, heading toward the offshore platforms. "That's where they're going," she murmured. Duncan followed her stare. "You think they'll try to finish the upload out there?" "I don't think," she said. "I know." The words felt strange in her mouth, too certain for the chaos around them, but she didn't doubt them. She could almost feel Hale's intent, the same way she'd felt something wrong before the first siren had sounded. It wasn't logic. It was instinct, an echo of something deeper, something inherited. She stopped beside a half-buried jeep, ripped open by the explosion. Inside, the ignition lights still flickered weakly. Ruiz climbed in, hot-wiring the system with practiced hands. Duncan hesitated beside her. "Ruiz, we can't go after them, not out there. We don't even know who's on our side anymore." She glanced up, eyes hard. "Then we don't need sides, we just need answers." The engine coughed, sputtered, then came alive with a deep growl. She threw it into gear, and the tires spun over the dirt, throwing up plumes of ash. Duncan climbed in reluctantly, gripping the side rail as they sped down the coastal road. The landscape around them blurred, barren hills, broken fences, the skeletal remains of observation towers silhouetted against the sun. The rhythmic crash of waves grew louder as they neared the cliffs. Ahead, the faint glimmer of the sea stretched wide and endless, its calm surface belying the chaos that had driven them there. As the jeep roared along the edge of the coastline, Duncan finally spoke again. "You really believe what Keene said? About your father?" Ruiz's hands tightened on the wheel. "I don't know what to believe. She could have been lying, manipulating you. Or telling me the truth," Ruiz said softly. "And maybe that's worse." The wind whipped through the broken windshield, carrying the sharp scent of salt and smoke. For a long stretch, neither of them spoke. The only sounds were the engine's hum and the ocean's relentless crash against the cliffs. Finally, Ruiz slowed the jeep near a bluff overlooking the water. In the distance, the offshore platforms rose from the mist, massive industrial silhouettes bristling with antennas and lights. The closest one, Platform 09, gleamed faintly under the morning sun. "That's it," she said. "The data servers. If Hale finishes the upload, whatever's on that drive won't just stay in the core. It'll hit every open network on the planet." Duncan stared out at the water, the vastness of it swallowing his words. "So what's the plan, swim?" Ruiz's eyes scanned the shoreline until she spotted a patrol dock, half collapsed but still holding a few boats. "Not swim," she said. They abandoned the jeep and made their way down the narrow, rocky path to the dock. The sea air hit them like a slap, cold, briny, alive. The water below was dark, shifting with hidden currents. Ruiz knelt beside an old motorboat, checking the fuel line. Miraculously, it wasn't empty. She started it, the small engine sputtering to life. Duncan jumped in after her and they pushed off, the boat slicing through the waves toward the platform. Halfway there, the fog thickened again, swallowing the horizon. The platform's outline blurred, then disappeared completely. Duncan's hand hovered near his sidearm. "This feels wrong." "It's supposed to," Ruiz said. The fog muffled everything, the engine, the waves, even their breathing. The only sound left was the faint hum beneath it all, the same low vibration Ruiz had heard before the attack began. Her pulse quickened. "You hear that?" Duncan nodded, frowning. "What is it?" Before she could answer, the fog ahead rippled with movement. A dark shape cut through it. A drone, larger than the ones they'd seen on base, sleek and silent. It hovered above the water, sensors glowing faintly blue, tracking them. "Kill the engine," Ruiz whispered. The motor went silent. The drone hung there, scanning. Then, as if satisfied, it drifted away into the mist. Duncan exhaled slowly. "They've got perimeter security." "Which means we're close," Ruiz said. When the fog finally broke, the platform loomed before them, massive, rusted, rising out of the sea like a fortress. Its surface was lined with floodlights, though most were dead. The sound of machinery echoed faintly from deep within. They climbed the service ladder one rung at a time until they reached the upper deck. The metal was slick beneath their boots, the air humming with energy from the generators below. The place felt abandoned, but Ruiz knew better. They moved through narrow corridors, the walls sweating with condensation, the floor vibrating softly underfoot. Everything was dimly lit, powered by backup circuits. A distant voice echoed through the metallic hallways. Hale's. "She'll come," he was saying. "I know she will." Ruiz froze. He was expecting her. They crept closer until they reached a doorway cracked open just enough to see through. Hale stood in the center of a small control room, hunched over another terminal. The data drive was plugged in again, its tiny light pulsing. Keen was nowhere to be seen. Ruiz pushed the door open slowly, her weapon raised. "It's over, Hale." He didn't turn. "You made it," he said quietly, almost relieved. "I wasn't sure you'd find me before they did." "Where's Keen?" "She's gone. They got to her first." His voice broke slightly. "She didn't make it." Ruiz hesitated. There was something in his tone. Grief, exhaustion, maybe even truth, but she didn't lower her weapon. "Then shut it down," she said. "End this." He looked back at her, eyes hollow. "I can't." "Why not?" "Because it's already transmitting." The monitor behind him flickered, lines of code scrolling faster than the eye could read. The upload was live. Duncan cursed under his breath. "Pull the plug!" Hale shook his head. "It won't matter. Once it starts, it replicates across networks automatically. There's no stopping it." Ruiz stepped closer, heart pounding. "Then why bring me here?" Hale met her gaze. "Because you deserve to know what your father died for." He turned the monitor toward her. The screen filled with a single image, an old mission report stamped with the words Project Seraph. The header read, "Civilian Relocation Testing, Operation Halo Fields." Below it, grainy footage began to play. Fields of scorched earth, structures half collapsed, people unarmed, terrified, running as soldiers advanced. Her father's name appeared in the list of operatives. Ruiz felt her knees weaken. "What is this?" "The program they swore never existed," Hale said. "Your father tried to expose it, they erased him, and then buried it under layers of false reports. The data I stole proves it. Names, footage, coordinates, all of it." Her breath came shallow and fast. "And you think unleashing it on the world fixes that?" Hale's voice was calm now, almost peaceful. "Truth isn't about fixing things, it's about ending lies." Before she could answer, an alarm blared through the platform, a deep mechanical roar that shook the floor beneath them. Duncan rushed to the window. "We've got company. 2 choppers inbound." Hale turned back to the console, his hands flying over the keys. "They'll try to destroy the servers before the upload finishes." Ruiz's mind raced. The world outside had collapsed into chaos. The rhythmic thump of approaching rotors, the wail of alarms, the shimmer of heat from the rising sun breaking through the fog. She looked at Hale. "How long?" 3 minutes, he said. "Then stop it." He didn't. Instead, he looked at her with something like pity. "You're still fighting the wrong enemy, Ruiz. The ones coming aren't here to save you, they're here to erase us both." The sound of gunfire erupted outside. Sparks showered the room as bullets struck the walls. Duncan ducked behind a console. Ruiz stayed standing, her weapon still trained on Hale. "You have one chance," she said. "Shut it down or I will." He stared at her, eyes steady. "Then I guess we'll see which side of the truth you're on." The glass behind him shattered as the first helicopter swept overhead. Wind tore through the room, scattering papers and debris. The monitors flickered wildly, alarms screaming in unison. Ruiz's finger tightened on the trigger, and for a single suspended heartbeat everything stopped. The fog outside glowed white against the rising sun. Hale's eyes met hers, calm, resolute. The timer on the console hit 2 minutes. Somewhere deep within the platform, a power surge ignited, and the entire structure shuddered as if the sea itself was holding its breath. Ruiz realized too late that the truth she'd been chasing might not just destroy the system, it might destroy everything tethered to it. And as the light from the monitors flared to white, the question she'd been running from finally clawed its way to the surface. If the truth cost everything, was she still willing to pay for it? The alarm wailed once more. The timer ticked down, and then the screen went black. The blackout felt like the world inhaling and refusing to exhale. Every light on the platform died at once, plunging the metal corridors into shadow. Only the pulse of the sea remained, an endless, distant heartbeat beneath the floor. Ruiz's breath echoed in the dark, shallow and fast, her fingers still wrapped around the trigger. Then one by one, emergency lights flickered to life. Red, dim, pulsing like veins through the structure. The monitors blinked back on, but they no longer showed code. Instead, they played images. Raw, unfiltered, undeniable. The footage Hale had spoken of filled the walls. Villages razed, children running through smoke. Unarmed civilians collapsing in fields scorched black. Marines in full combat gear moving through the chaos. And among them, one face, one man, her father. The camera froze on him, his expression caught between fury and grief, his voice barely audible over the static. "They said it was for protection," he whispered in the recording. "But this isn't defense. This is erasure." Ruiz staggered back, the words tearing through her like shrapnel. All the questions she'd buried, why her father's death had never made sense, why his records were sealed, now unfolded before her in images that left no room for denial. Behind her, Hale spoke softly. "Now you see it. Now you understand why this has to come out." The footage kept rolling, and the audio deepened into a briefing. Voices of officers, calm and detached, discussing acceptable collateral, containment ratios, and data cleansing. Each phrase felt like a blade. Ruiz lowered her weapon. "He tried to stop them." "He did," Hale said, "and they killed him for it, but he left traces, buried them deep. I found what he couldn't finish." The room shook with another explosion, closer this time. Metal screamed. Dust rained from the ceiling. The sound of helicopters was louder now, circling like vultures above a carcass. Duncan pressed against the door, shouting over the noise. "They're breaching the deck. We've got to move." But Ruiz couldn't move. She stood rooted before the screen, staring at the image of her father, the man she'd built her discipline, her loyalty, her whole identity around. And now, that image was fracturing, splintering into something she didn't recognize. The video cut to black. For a heartbeat, the silence returned. Then a new image appeared. A document, its heading stark and simple. Authorization of termination. Subject A. Ruiz. Her father's file. The order for his death. The signature at the bottom was clear. Major Laura Keene. Ruiz felt her chest tighten, breath catching like she'd been struck. Hale watched her, expression unreadable. "She didn't die out there," Ruiz said slowly. "You lied." Hale didn't deny it. "She's still alive. She was never your enemy, Ruiz. She's your father's final safeguard. She's the only one who can prove what really happened." The platform shuddered again, throwing them against the wall. Sparks burst from the ceiling. Duncan grabbed her arm. We're out of time. Hale moved to the console, typing furiously. I can reroute the transmission, get it off-site before they destroy the servers. Where? Ruiz demanded. Somewhere they can't reach. The world needs to see this. No, she snapped. You're not thinking. If this goes public, names, coordinates, classified ops, it'll start wars. It'll kill more people. Hale's voice rose, desperate. And if it stays hidden, it keeps killing in silence. You think loyalty means safety? It just means complicity. His words echoed against the metal walls. For a moment she saw him not as a traitor, but as a man crushed by the weight of truth too heavy to carry alone. Outside, the roar of gunfire drew closer. The retrieval teams had landed. The sound of boots hammered down the corridors, sharp and coordinated. Hale pressed one final command and turned back to her. You can shoot me if you have to, but this doesn't stop anymore. Ruiz hesitated, torn between instinct and something deeper. Something that felt like the ghost of her father's voice whispering from the past. Always trust what doesn't feel right. The first blast door caved in. Smoke poured into the corridor. The red lights pulsed faster, turning the air into a fever dream of motion and color. Duncan pulled her back, yelling over the chaos. Ruiz, come on! But Hale stayed at the terminal, his silhouette illuminated by the storm outside. Go, he shouted. Find Keen. She has the rest. A bullet tore through the glass behind him and he fell without a sound. Ruiz froze. For a heartbeat, everything stopped again. The noise, the lights, the movement. Only the slow fall of Hale's body, the thud against the floor, the stillness after impact. She stared at him, the man who'd betrayed his country for her father's ghost. The man who'd believed that truth was worth burning the world for. Then she turned and ran. The corridors were chaos, smoke, shouting, flashes of light from muzzle fire. She moved like instinct, ducking low, weaving through the metal maze. Duncan was behind her, covering their retreat. Every doorway, every flicker of shadow felt like the end waiting to happen. They burst through the maintenance hatch and into the open air. The platform was burning. Flames licked the edges of the deck, reflecting on the black water below. 2 helicopters hovered above, their searchlights slicing through the smoke. Ruiz spotted a service lift leading down the side of the structure. She grabbed Duncan's arm and pointed. There. They sprinted through falling debris, bullets ricocheting off the railings. Ruiz slammed the control lever, and the lift jolted to life, descending toward the lower levels. The sea wind hit them hard, tearing at their faces, carrying the sound of chaos above. As they dropped, Duncan looked at her, his voice barely audible over the roar. What now? Where do we even go? Keen, she said. He said she has the rest. Even if she does, you really think she'll help us? Ruiz didn't answer. Her eyes were fixed on the horizon, the faint line where the gray sky met the darker water. I don't think she'll have a choice. The lift reached the lower maintenance deck, slamming into place. They jumped onto a walkway that extended over the ocean. The fog had returned, thicker than before, swallowing everything. Behind them, the platform erupted in a final explosion, an orange bloom that shattered the air. The shockwave hit them like a hammer, knocking both to their knees. The sea rose in a wall of spray and sound. Ruiz looked back, her face lit by the flames. The structure that had held her past and the truth about her father crumbled into the sea, vanishing beneath the smoke. For a long moment she couldn't move. The fire, the wind, the salt, all of it blurred together until she couldn't tell if the sting in her eyes was from the smoke or the weight of everything she'd seen. Duncan reached a hand toward her, his voice hoarse. It's over. But she shook her head slowly. No, it's just changed. In the distance, beyond the mist, she saw another light, small, steady, moving away from the wreckage. A boat, and at its helm, a silhouette. Keen. Ruiz stared after it, the shape cutting through fog like a scar. The woman who'd signed her father's death order, the woman who now held the other half of the truth. The wind howled through the twisted metal, carrying Hale's final words in echoes she could almost hear. Find Keen. Ruiz rose, gripping the railing, her eyes following the light as it faded into the gray. Somewhere deep beneath the grief, something began to harden. Not anger, not vengeance, but resolve. She turned to Duncan, voice low but steady. We need to find another boat. He looked at her like she was breaking. Ruiz, you can't keep chasing this. You'll end up like them. She met his gaze. Then I'll finally know what they died for. Above them, the sky was beginning to shift, dark clouds tearing open to reveal the faintest line of dawn. The sea below churned, restless, reflecting both the light and the fire. Ruiz took one last look at the burning platform, then stepped into the mist, following the fading trail of the boat. The wind carried her words away, barely more than a whisper. No more lies. And with that, the fog swallowed her again, moving toward whatever truth waited beyond the horizon, unaware that it was already watching her, waiting to decide whether she would expose it or become part of it. The ocean had quieted by dawn. The smoke had thinned into a gray veil drifting across the horizon, and the waves had gone from wild to rhythmic, their crash against the steel beams soft and steady, like a heartbeat returning to normal after a long panic. Ruiz stood at the edge of the pier, her uniform torn, the salt drying against her skin, the world behind her in ruins. The air smelled of fuel and ash, but the light was clean, stretching in long amber lines across the sea. She hadn't spoken since the platform went under. Duncan stood a few feet behind her, pacing without purpose, the weight of silence heavy between them. He was shaking his head, half in disbelief, half in exhaustion. We should have been dead 3 times over, he muttered. Ruiz didn't answer. Her eyes were fixed on the horizon, the same direction where the small boat had vanished into fog hours earlier. She could still see it if she closed her eyes. A faint light, steady and cold, slipping toward whatever came next. When she finally spoke, her voice was quiet, raw. She's still out there. Duncan stopped pacing. Keen? Ruiz nodded. And she knows I'm coming. He sighed, rubbing his face. You really think she's just waiting around to tell you the truth? She signed your father's death order, Ruiz. If she wanted to explain, she would have done it years ago. Maybe she didn't have a reason to, Ruiz said softly. Now she does. For a while, they said nothing more. The wind shifted, lifting strands of her hair, carrying the smell of salt and rust. Somewhere out there, beyond what the eye could reach, was a woman who might be the last piece of a story buried under years of lies and silence. By the time the rescue crews arrived from the mainland, the fires had burned out and the sea had begun to reclaim the wreckage. Ruiz gave her statement, the official one. She told them there had been an explosion during a security breach, that several personnel were missing in action. She did not mention the footage, or Hale, or the truth that still burned in her hands like a hidden ember she couldn't let go of. They put her in an infirmary tent along the shore. A medic cleaned her wounds, said she was lucky, said she'd live. But Ruiz barely heard him. The tent walls swayed with the wind, thin as breath. Beyond them, the ocean glittered like a secret. That night, as the others slept, she slipped out and sat on the sand, facing the horizon. The sky was a soft black stitched with stars. She thought of her father, the man she had turned into an emblem, a myth of duty and honor. But now that myth had cracks. He wasn't a symbol anymore. He was a person who had seen something too dark to ignore, and he had paid for it. She wondered if he had known she'd end up here, standing where truth and obedience blurred into the same shade of gray. Duncan found her there hours later, a duffel slung over his shoulder. Command's shipping us back to the mainland tomorrow, he said. They're already calling it a malfunction, classified training failure. Of course they are. He crouched beside her. You can still walk away from this, let it go. Ruiz looked at him, really looked. His face was lined with fatigue, eyes red from smoke and sleeplessness. You think I can? I think you should, he said quietly. Sometimes the truth doesn't fix anything. Sometimes it just breaks whatever's left. She let the words sit between them, the sound of waves filling the space they didn't know how to bridge. Then she asked, almost to herself, "And what happens when we stop trying to fix anything at all?" He didn't answer. By morning, she was gone. The search for Keene took weeks. Ruiz followed fragments, old naval records, coded communications, coordinates buried in encrypted data Hale had left behind. Each step led her further from the coast, deeper into the quiet parts of the world where old ghosts were kept alive by whispers and unfinished missions. She found Keene in a weathered house on the edge of a bay in Alaska, where the sea met cliffs of black stone, and the air carried the sound of gulls that never came close. The woman was older than Ruiz had imagined, her hair silver, her posture still straight. She opened the door before Ruiz even knocked, as if she'd been waiting. "You look like him," Keene said. Ruiz's throat tightened. "You signed his death order." Keene nodded once. "I did." "Why?" The older woman stepped aside, gesturing her in. The room smelled of wood smoke and salt. Maps and old dossiers were pinned across the walls, the kind of paper that had yellowed with time but not age. It was the kind that aged with guilt. Keene poured 2 cups of tea and sat at the table. He wasn't supposed to die. None of them were. I tried to stop it, but by the time I realized how deep the program went, it was too late. Ruiz stayed standing. "Program?" Keene looked up at her, the faint tremor in her hands betraying everything her calm voice tried to hide. "Project Echo. It started as data monitoring, predictive threat mapping. They wanted to use AI to identify potential insurgencies before they began. But it turned into something else. They started planting events instead of predicting them. Small, controllable chaos to justify action. Your father found out. He thought he could expose it." Ruiz felt the air go cold. "And they killed him." Keene nodded again, eyes heavy. "I signed the authorization, yes, but I didn't realize what it truly meant until after he was gone. It wasn't a termination order, it was a cover sheet. They made me believe it was an evacuation command. By the time I knew, his team was already erased from the records." She pushed a small data drive across the table. "Everything he left behind is here. His reports, his messages to me. He trusted me to guard it until the right person came." Ruiz stared at the drive. "And now I'm that person?" Keene gave a faint, bitter smile. "You always were." He made sure of it. For a long time, neither spoke. The sound of wind against the glass filled the silence, steady and unrelenting. Ruiz finally sat, the chair creaking under her weight. "What am I supposed to do with it?" Keene looked toward the sea outside. "Whatever he couldn't." The words hung there, quiet but enormous. Ruiz looked down at the drive again, so small, so fragile, yet heavy enough to tilt the balance of everything she'd ever believed in. When she finally stepped outside, the sun was setting behind the cliffs, and the light turned the waves copper and gold. She could see her reflection in the water, rippled and uncertain, like a version of herself that didn't yet exist, but was waiting to. She thought about Hale, about Duncan, about her father, about how truth could destroy just as much as lies could preserve. And she realized that the difference between the two wasn't in what they revealed. It was in who had the strength to carry them forward. For the first time, she didn't feel like a soldier. She felt human, raw, unfinished, breakable, but real. She walked down to the shore, her boots sinking into the wet sand. The drive in her hand felt warm from her palm. She turned it over once, twice, then slipped it into her jacket pocket. The horizon stretched ahead, open and endless. Duncan's voice echoed faintly in her mind. Sometimes the truth doesn't fix anything. Maybe he was right. Maybe the truth didn't fix. Maybe it only freed. The waves came and went, erasing her footprints as fast as she could make them. The world kept moving, indifferent and eternal. Somewhere behind her, the house stood silent. Ahead, the sea waited. She drew in a deep breath, the cold air filling her lungs, and whispered to the wind, "You were right, Dad. The hardest part isn't knowing. It's deciding what to do after." The tide pulled back, soft and slow. The light thinned into twilight. In that fragile space between day and night, Ruiz realized that some orders weren't meant to be followed, and some truths weren't meant to be hidden. And though the sirens had long faded, their echo remained in her memory, not as a warning, but as a reminder of the moment she stopped being a rookie and started becoming herself. As the last of the sun disappeared beneath the sea, she turned away from the water and began to walk, her figure small against the vastness, the sound of her boots carried off by the wind. Somewhere, far out beyond the waves, the world still spun on the same lies it always had. But she carried something now, a sliver of truth, quiet but alive, like a spark waiting for the right moment to catch. And maybe that was enough. Because in the end, it wasn't the sirens or the orders or even the lies that defined her. It was what she chose to do after the noise stopped. And as the sky deepened into night, one last question lingered in the air, soft, haunting, and endless. When the truth finally finds you, will you be ready to hear it?